Hi, I'm Daniel Roberts, and you are listening to the Giving Town podcast, where we share stories of hope and generosity in our wonderful community of Newberg, Oregon, and the surrounding area. In today's episode, I'm talking to Leslie Murray, pastor of North Valley Friends Church, about the upcoming Peace Trail Village. Now, there's been a lot of different and conflicting information about this project. So in this episode, Leslie's going to be sharing what the project actually is and isn't, how it got started, and why it's so important for Newberg. This podcast is also sponsored by my real estate team, the Joyful Roberts Group, and we're a family real estate team here in town with Premier Property Group, LLC. I make this podcast because I love this town. I love highlighting the great people and organizations of this community and highlighting things like the Peace Trail Village. And I also love helping people move here and sharing with people why I love Newberg. But I also have a YouTube channel that educates people on the more real estate related aspects of living in Newberg. I also got things like market updates. So for example, I just released a video about buying a home in 2023. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can check out our YouTube channel, which is linked in the description below. And with that, let's get to my conversation today with Leslie. Leslie, thank you so much for taking the time to come be on the podcast and share your heart and what really the truth is, I guess, behind Peace Trail Village. I know there's been a lot of different conversations in town about it, but I'm really looking forward to helping our community get a better idea and better understanding of what Peace Trail Village is and what it's all about. So to start, could you just share what Peace Trail Village is and how this whole project got started, how it came to be?
Yeah, so Peace Trail Village is a ministry of North Valley Friends Church. North Valley's been around. We just had our 50th anniversary. And there's been a sense as part of our mission for the long haul that God has been generous with us, and we seek to be generous because of that. And so for 30 years, we've been long-range planning how to use this gift of land that we have up there. We had 26 acres. Part of that vision was to sell 5 acres to a Christian school under market value as part of our mission. And then to expand that to social service buildings, fields, a walking trail, a labyrinth. So all those things, not all of them, but the walking trail and the labyrinth and selling off to a school, that's all up there. And so Peace Trail Village comes out of that heart to be generous and to use what God has given us where that meets up with the community's need. And the issue of housing has come up time and time again.
Yeah.
So North Valley is, up until 5 years ago, we were in the urban growth boundary, and now we're annexed into the city as of 5 years ago. But being on the outskirts of town, we would have people coming to us for housing, wanting to pitch a tent on our lawn or sleep in our alcove or park their car in our carport. So it seemed like the community's need was coming to our doorstep. Mm-hmm. And we started thinking deeper about, are there better ways to help the community rather than just giving a place of safety for a few nights? Is there a more collective vision that we could participate in? And about the same time, Newberg High School had started a new class with a new teacher, Matt Miller, who started Integrated Design Systems, IDS. And that class was looking at what were some of the community's needs and how could a group of high schoolers meet any of them. Was there something that they could do? And again, the issue of housing, of houselessness kept coming up. And so this class decided to build a tiny home. And Matt approached us kind of during a chaotic time in the church's history and said, we're building this tiny home. You have wonderful property. Is there any chance we could give this tiny home to you for you to be able to house some folks in it? And at that time, it was not a great time to be considering something of that magnitude. And so we sadly said, no, it's not, this is a great idea. We're all for it. This is this is not a good time for us. And he came back 4 months later and said, I have talked to many churches around town, and I still don't have a place. Is the church in any different place now? And at that time, the chaos that we had been going through had dissipated, and we prayed about it, considered it, and said, you know what? Yeah, I think so. And so we said yes. And so they finished up that tiny home throughout the summers. I mean, students came in, even students that had graduated, to work to finish this tiny home. I remember at old-fashioned days, we parked it right in front of the cultural center so folks could walk through it, and the students showcased their work.
Yeah.
We had 4 students from our church also in that class who also built it. So it was like this
fun.
Really cool, multiple connections. Anyway, and yeah, we received that first tiny home, and the high school continued to build a second one, and then a third one, which they gifted to a person that had been living on our property for many years in a dilapidated RV.
Yeah.
So the church has received 2 tiny homes, and she received her own tiny home. So when we first received the tiny home, I was connected to the Providence Bob program, who agreed to work with us and provide vetting of people for that tiny home.
And what is the Bob program?
Yeah, Newberg, not Newberg, Providence, but it's a regional Providence program, building better outcomes.
Okay. So you got connected with them.
We got connected with them, and they provide wraparound case management. So Providence in general is asking some really cool questions about if they see a person repeatedly in the emergency department. They're starting to ask questions like, tell me about your housing security or your food security, recognizing that if your basic needs are not met, it's very difficult to heal then from other things.
Yeah.
And so if they
and
identify...
you're more susceptible to anything.
Right.
I mean, high stress.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when they're seeing people kind of over and over again, they're asking some of these bigger questions. So the ED would identify someone that maybe has a medical issue that because of lack of adequate housing, whatever health issue they're having, the housing is a key component in their healing.
Yeah.
And so Bob would identify someone. They would bring the case to North Valley and say, here's what they're going through. This is what we project. You know, they have transportation. They've done all the vetting and that it's a good fit for us. And so almost always with Providence, we would agree with their assessment and say, yeah, that seems like a good fit. And then they would come in, and the Providence Bob caseworker would provide case management. Sometimes it's assisting them, helping apply for housing, or their maybe their rental history is kind of messy, and so helping them clean that up, and whatever the barriers are from being able to move into permanent housing, that caseworker is giving support and assistance to be able to remove those barriers. Because our program is meant to be a transitional housing. It's very difficult to move just from living in your car to heading down to the new apartment building
Extremely
and
difficult.
Applying to get in. You don't have first, last, and it takes a lot of money, a good rental history, and your applications in there with 50 others.
Right.
So we have a real housing shortage, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah. So from all that, then how did Peace Trail Village specifically come out of that?
Oh, yeah. So we just, as Newberg High School was giving us 1 tiny home, 2 tiny homes, as a church, we said, okay, hang on, let's pray about this as a church and figure out how much do we want to grow this program, what is sustainable for us as a church, and instead of just saying yes to everything, what is maybe a more collective vision for this ministry. Mm-hmm. And so we spent, again, months praying. We're Quakers, so it takes quite a while.
Yeah.
And in March of 21, we approved a vision for 8 to 9 tiny homes. At that point, it was going to be a tiny home village. So 8 or 9 tiny homes on our property, connected into services, to expand the partnership with Providence. And we felt like 8 to 9 tiny homes was something we could do sustainably, and still make an impact in Newberg. Mm-hmm. So because there's not city code for tiny homes, quickly when we began the work with the city, we recognized that it would need to move to a cottage cluster format, which is honestly much nicer accommodations than a tiny home on wheels. So these are 300 square feet with kitchenette and full services, shower, toilet, bed, everything you need to live simply in 300 square feet. So it would be 8 cottages with a 9th building for laundry services for the village. Okay.
So what specifically, we've talked about the housing and kind of how this started, but how is this the best option? Because I know a lot of people have talked about you should do this, but you came to the conclusion that this was the best option. So what did you weigh and vet and say, okay, these options are out, this is it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It may be an obvious answer, but
well, part of it is the property that we had, or the resources that we had. One is the property. We saw that as a resource and a gift, and thought, well, we could do something here. We're out in the country. We don't have a lot of neighbors. We do have some neighbors. We feel like it's a beautiful place and a beautiful space. We have a community garden and a free clothing closet right on site, a walking trail. It already feels like it's conducive to healing in that space. Mm-hmm. So, when we were being led to housing, we walked all through the property, talked through all different locations all over the property, and the piece that we landed on seemed like the best fit because of its proximity to resources, where the city water and sewer and where the electrical box thing is, and it's flat. There wouldn't be a ton of money going to earthwork. And there's we don't have to put in extra parking because it's right near our parking lot. Mm-hmm. So in many ways, it made a lot of sense in that location.
Yeah, and I guess one of the other things is a lot of people have said, oh, we can do better than this, or versus having cottages versus actual homes. But like you said, it's really difficult to go. So as a realtor, I could see how difficult it is for people to get into housing, and it's not getting any better. People with solid jobs can't even find housing. And for most rental places, like for most apartments, and granted, I know investors, they need the security, and there's a lot of sides to it. But either way, even to get into an apartment, an entry-level apartment for a family, even if you're squeezing into 2 bedrooms, you're still going to be looking at probably like $1,400, and that's going to be going up. Then you have to make 3 times that per month to qualify, so $4,500 a month. Right. And that's like, a lot of people can't make that. That's in many cases hard to come by. And I think this is absolutely brilliant because 300 square feet it's enough. Like you're in stable housing, like you're not, like you have a space that's yours, but you don't need all the other stuff. And what's the total cost after all this? Do you know? I know it's a lot, but
we originally thought when it was going to be a tiny home village, we estimated it as costing $700,000 to put in everything.
Okay.
And our latest estimate is 1.5 million now because we moved from receiving tiny homes to building essentially tiny little cabins.
So if you called it 1.6 million just for number's sake, and there were 8, that's $200,000 per cottage. Whereas to build a 2-bedroom house costs to be able to sell it, there's that. It costs anywhere between probably $350,000. Then there's all those things that go into it. So really, I don't know. I think for the amount of space that you're able to put it in, I think it's a really good solution. And I think it's honestly a little bit sad that it took 4 months and they couldn't find another church to put the original tiny home.
That's right.
Because I have heard people say this should go, over here, it should be somewhere else. Okay, well, no one else is stepping up to the plate. So I'm glad you guys did. But I guess kind of moving into some other questions that the community's had, or some people in the community have had about what this actually is. So one, they're cottage clusters. I've seen, honestly, I'm a little confused because I don't understand, and maybe I haven't done enough research to know why it's being called this. But when I first heard about this, I heard of it referred to as a homeless camp. And there's a petition going out about, they're putting a homeless camp by the school. It's dangerous. And I was concerned. I was like, well, that doesn't seem like a great idea because, I do volunteer work with the homeless population. I know that there's a lot of instability and drug use and that kind of thing. But from what I found, and obviously after learning more about this, it's really not a homeless camp. That's not really a good representation of it. Do you know how that got started? Or, it seems like looking at the facts would pretty quickly dispel that, but I think there's some terminology out there still calling it a homeless camp. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, that's really difficult part in Newberg right now. That petition went out, and none of the 3 petitioners reached out to us and asked about Peace Trail Village at all. And so all of a sudden there's a petition being filed with the city and circulated for signatures to prevent a homeless camp. And we've had people in our church who had signature collectors come to their door, and they're talking for 5 minutes. And after asking questions, the homeowner's like, wait a minute, you're talking about my church. We're not doing that. What are you talking about? So I can't really say much on the petition side because I think that's a big reason why there's misconceptions out in the community about what it is. I know there's a lot of fear about, we don't want to be Portland. We don't want, tent cities popping up. Yeah. Well, we don't want that either. That's not our intention at all. Our desire is to create healthy, safe housing for folks recovering from a medical issue, and folks that need, that transition step from subpar housing to sustainable, healthy housing. Yeah. We're not trying to put a homeless camp up.
So what separates what this is from a homeless camp?
Well, everything. A homeless camp, you could just probably bring your tent and pop it up. And first of all, you can't do that on our property if that happened.
So people are not allowed to.
They're not allowed to do that. There's an entire vetting process for every guest in it, in connection between, the caseworker and myself. So it's caseworker, person, and North Valley all doing that vetting process. There's a criminal history check. So there are parameters that we stay in. There would be no one that has a history of sex offending, for example. There'd be no one that has a history of violence. Because we're a church, because we're next to a school, of course, it is not our desire to bring in people that would not be a good fit there. Part of our program agreement is that the individuals or guests are not active in their addiction should they be recovering. So there's no drug use, no alcohol.
Do they pay rent? Or
yeah.
Is it? Okay.
So part of being transitional housing would be that it's a a sliding scale.
Yeah.
Maybe when you first come the first month, you can't pay very much. Maybe it's $10 a week that you're paying. But as time goes on, as you look towards permanent housing, rent is a big part of your paycheck. And so that also would increase as you start to look at moving on to a permanent housing.
So it sounds like this is a lot more in line with an affordable apartment than it is with a homeless camp. I mean,
oh, absolutely. And we've looked at a number of pods and villages all over Oregon. We're not the first ones doing this. We are learning from other programs all over the state that are doing this work. And so modeling after what we've seen there, and we have been doing it for 2 years. So we've been tweaking and learning.
I bet most people don't know this is actually a step up from
right.
what's been going on anyway.
And nobody even knew that was going on also.
Well, and so here's the thing, is you don't build a homeless camp. A homeless camp is an area of land that's flat that people come and stay on.
Yeah.
So if this was really a homeless camp, it would be, oh, hey, you can come stay on our property. No one would even know about it. There would be no permits with the city. I mean, there would just be like, hey, sure, you can sleep here. And that, the irony is that, one, no one would know, no one really cares. It's just, okay, whatever. But that's the thing that people don't want. But when you're doing the step up, that's actually transitional housing, that's actually safe, more like an apartment building, then that's when people started getting upset. So the whole thing is kind of, my background's in engineering, so I have a very like analytical, like fact-based like mind. So I've believed things that aren't true before. Obviously we all do. But I think you always have to have a desire to look at what the truth is and know what's actually going on here. Because I think if people had stopped and asked, hey, what's the plan here? A transitional housing program near school sounds not near as bad as a homeless camp near a school. So anyway, all those things just were kind of interesting. And I appreciate you sharing more of the facts and more of the details. And I really hope that people can look at the facts and really make up those decisions. And I think this is what our city really needs. Because again, I know people don't want Newberg to turn into Portland, but housing is expensive. Builders have to be able to make a profit. I mean, builders are not nonprofits. Building's expensive, land's expensive, permits are expensive, labor's expensive, materials expensive, all of it's expensive. And so really, yes, we do need more building, but since 2011, we've been underbuilt, and high interest rates don't help that either, because that's even more expensive. So it's not that Newberg's turning into Portland, it's just that housing is expensive. It's really expensive to build new homes, and more people want to buy homes than there are homes available. So what that means is same thing with apartments. If you can't buy a home, you're in an apartment, and if you're not in an apartment, you're in your car or on the street.
Yeah,
or ideally, if there were more programs like this, transitional housing programs, this is really what we need. I mean, this is the very thing we need. And I really hope we can get more things like this. I know many of us really miss Denise Bacon, but I know she was really one who pushed for this and a lot of things like this. And I think we really need that heart still of just recognizing how important this really is. And my hope for our community is that we can stop arguing about the details and logistics and whether or not there's plumbing, and how that all connects in, and say, okay, we need to be doing more things like this. And I mean, you can't. The only way to I honestly don't know another solution. As someone who works in the real estate industry, I'm honestly very concerned that there's just not housing for people. And you can complain all you want, but you have to have like 2 solid incomes in order, or just one really good income to buy a house, and pretty decent income to rent somewhere. So either you can kick everyone out and say, we don't want poor people living here, but you don't want to phrase it that way because that doesn't sound good. Or some people say that anyway, I'm sure. Or we need transitional housing. So
we need to be creative, right? We don't think this is going to solve Newberg's housing crisis,
right?
But we hope it is one piece of a creative solution.
Yeah.
To talk on your point about, we had a guest staying in our tiny home who worked full time and still unable to pay for an apartment on her own.
Mm-hmm.
It was just tremendous to me. All of our guests so far have been local people who have grown up in Newberg, who are embedded in our community, whose extended families are here. And on your other point about housing, the LA Times had an article last fall, a research study, and it said the communities struggling with houselessness had two things in common. And one was higher end homes going in, mm-hmm. and two, just the not enough housing, period. Yeah. And Newberg has both of those,
yeah,
to the nth degree.
Honestly, every city around here, pretty much.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I appreciate that, and I kind of feel passionate about this. I think the other thing is, so I volunteer at Love Inc. as one of the intake people. So I'm face-to-face with people who, and I guess for context, I grew up kind of with the idea of like, well, go get a job, stop being a bum, go get a job, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, oh man, like if I had this circumstance, I probably would be dead or I would just, I don't know, but like some of the horrendous things that happen to people that are completely outside of their control. For sure. An example, car accident, you've got an injury, you can't work. You also have a child who is diagnosed with a debilitating disease, so you're trying to take care of them. You're kicked out of your apartment because you don't have rent. So now you're living in your car with a child with a debilitating disease, and you have a lot of neurological disorders because of your car accident, and the stress of being on the street is now preventing you from getting steady housing, or you're forgetting things, and now you're chronically homeless trying to take care of a little one.
Yep.
And say, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, go get a job. It's like you're totally missing what's going on. Yeah. And the insensitivity and I think lack of awareness of, it's not that someone's like, you know what, I think I'm going to stop working today and go live on the streets. There's extremely difficult, tragic situations that happen that, and having no family or friends that can support them. Maybe their family's all drug addicts and so they can't move in. My wife and I at one point had a rough spot. We had to move in with her family for a while. Very grateful that we were able to do that.
What if you didn't have that?
Yeah,
right?
and we might have been able to, we probably could have figured out other solutions, but it's like the perfect storm. When the perfect storm happens, you don't have that fallback. You have these other things that happen. And that's most of these people's stories is every once in a while, like very, very rarely, there's someone who's like, yeah, you probably just need to, in my mind, I'm thinking like, I think you just need to like explore your options a bit more. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, I think people just don't know how hard it is when you don't have, when you're living, you've got your jobs that you've had for, a decade, you're in your home or your apartment, you just see someone on the side of the street and you're like, this homeless problem. It's like, well, do something about it, learn their story. Mm-hmm. And don't judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes or slept a night in their tent. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's kind of my perspective. So I guess I am a little biased, admittedly, on this whole thing. At the same time, I help people buy homes. So, it's kind of both of those things. I know what it's like, and there's no easy solution. So I'm just really grateful you guys are doing what you are, and I'd love to see more things like this, more innovative solutions. And I know it's just tricky. Like there's no way of getting around it. And yeah. So anyway, along with that, I know there have been some comments about specifically with Veritas, who's right there. Some people have said, and I don't honestly know how much collaboration there was with them or with other neighbors or community members. But from your side, can you just speak to what, if any, collaboration or communication there was with neighboring entities?
Yeah, sure. So with Veritas, North Valley and Veritas have been neighbors for 5 years now, and we have a quarterly meeting with a couple of church leaders and a couple of their board members every quarter for the last 5 years. So, 4 years ago, we shared with them that, hey, we're looking at some possible solutions to houselessness and maybe doing something creative on the property. And then 2 years ago, officially told them, hey, we just approved this plan. Here's a diagram of it. It wasn't then relayed to their constituency, so that became really tricky. There was a breakdown between the board and parents, like how the communication came. And so when North Valley applied for an ARPA grant and received $400,000 to build transitional housing, there's a lot of fear because we did not have a lot of information out there in the cyber sphere about what we were doing.
Yeah.
We also, I couldn't have dreamed that we were going to get an ARPA grant.
Yeah.
So we were really caught off guard, and also praising God, like it felt like a miracle. But then it meant we had a lot of work to do to make sure that the correct narrative was out about what we were doing.
Gotcha. So a lot of the information came after okay. So it was people just didn't know what it was, and then you're like, oh. Yeah. And so from your perspective, it sounds like maybe you just thought like, hey, we're doing this thing. It's great. Why would anyone oppose it? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh,
yes,
people do oppose it. And now you're having to explain
what it is. I was really surprised.
Yeah. Which probably feels a bit like a slap in the face to be putting so much effort into something for the community. I mean, you mentioned earlier, like a gift to the community that is the community's now slapping you for.
Yeah.
Probably.
Or saying, well, this is a great idea, do it somewhere else. That's the narrative that we're hearing quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love to know who else wants this on their property.
Yeah.
Because...
Well, all you got to do is gift North Valley Friends some more property, and I'm sure you guys would do it.
$1.6 million.
And $1.6 million. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the... when I was an engineer, there was one of the senior engineers that called people like me idea fairies. And to be fair, he had a good point, because it's so easy to come up with an idea of like, well, we'll just do this or this. Like, okay, are you going to run with this project and make sure it gets done from beginning to end and oversee all the different steps to do it? Like, actually, no, I'm not going to do that at all. I have no time. So it's really easy to say, we'll go do this somewhere else. Like, all we need is someone to donate the land at $1.6 million, and sure. And as soon as that happens, great, we'd love to do it there. But
and to continue to be invested. Like, we're not. This is not something we're just knocking out and then moving on. I mean, this is a ministry and a gift to the community that is going to be ongoing for decades. Yeah. Like, it's not easy. Like, if we were going to do something easy, this was not it. Yeah. And we're really invested and feel called to it. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that, the saying, do not grow weary in doing good. Mm. But I think a lot of times you get... many of the great people, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, to be fair to them, not necessarily to put you on that same level, but, at the time, there was a lot of resistance to what they were doing. And only afterwards did we say, like, wow, how great, what great people. But, I kind of see in similar ways, you're doing something that's really good that is misunderstood or maybe rubs some people the wrong way, which is unfortunate. I think, again, going back to the homeless camp, if it was that, like, that makes sense. Like, at the beginning, if people didn't know what it was, they just hear it's a homeless camp. I understand there's a lot of concerns. So from people who kind of were initially like, what's going on here? You're building a homeless camp near a school. Have some of those people come back around and said, oh, we now know what you're doing.
So then we did a lot of work, right? We North Valley hosted an informational evening for parents of students at Veritas back in the summer, and we've worked really hard to update our website and to put narratives and stories and the design of what we are building on there. We've tried to work really hard to get the correct information out in the public. We are also going to be working with North Valley and Veritas are working on what's known as a good neighbor agreement. So a lot of other villages have also developed good neighbor agreements, and it's an agreement between the village and those neighbors around, which for North Valley is primarily Veritas. I mean, like I said, we have 20 acres, and then the nearest neighborhood is a ways between us, and half of those people worship at North Valley already, so they were already on board. But yeah, we're working on a good neighbor agreement, which outlines, what can Veritas expect from Peace Trail Village and from North Valley as far as communication. If something goes awry, what is the chain of command? How do we deal with that? We've shared with them our program agreement and all our documents that we've used internally with the village, so that they can know the full scope of the program. So yeah, we're working on that good neighbor agreement with them, and I have heard from a number of parents that were saying, "Oh yeah, I was concerned, but now that I hear about this, I might still have some questions, but my fear level has gone way down, and I understand that it's not at all what I was afraid of." It's still unknown though, right? I think there's still some question, and well, how's this really going to work? And we're really committed to working on that and communicating well with Veritas.
And when is it projected to be completed?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So right now our Type 1 application is in the city, and we're waiting any day now for our approval, and then we will pull permits and start to break ground. It depends on grant funding, as I find $1.6 million, and we are also partnering with Home Builders Association, who they're a fabulous organization with contractors from all over the state who give their time pro bono. They get a lot of gifts in kind, and also have access to some grant money. But they will be the primary builder on our project, and so depending on kind of how their network works would depend on the timing of our build. Gotcha. So our ARPA funds need to be used up by the end of 2024. That'll be no problem. We're almost we're a fourth of the way through them already, just between engineering and architecture. So I think with the digging and the earth movement, we'll be almost there of using up those funds.
So do you have an idea of when that will actually be? This is a very nice political answer. I'm just wondering if there's...
I don't even know. I mean, I guess I could tell you, like, I really hope that we're up and running in a year. But I'm a pastor and a social worker by degree, and I had no idea engineering and architecture could even take the 6 months it's taken. So it's all taking longer than I thought.
So basically you have to get permits. Once you have permits, then you can start doing the breaking ground, and then... And then we build. I mean... And the services and the lines are already connected, right?
So the water and the sewer are... the church is not on city water and sewer. We are on a pump, a septic pump, and a well right now. Part of the trickiness is the city needs a pump upgrade also near us. And so the city's working on that. When that happens, then the church and the village will all be tied in. So Veritas is already tied in, but we're not yet.
Gotcha. So it's kind of an unknown then when that's all going to happen. Fair. It's fair. I know things kind of tend to move slowly. So for people who want more information, or to learn more about this, or to get involved, how would they do that?
Yeah, if you want more information, you can go to northvalleyfriends.org. We have a tab right there on our main page, Peace Trail Village. Our phone number is 503-538-5340. I mean, I really encourage people, if you have questions or concerns, or something doesn't seem quite right in your understanding, reach out, email us or call us. Or I'd way rather have that than misinformation out in the community.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to get involved, that would be great. I am trying to learn how to write grants, but that's not my strength. One, I need help finding grants that are out there, and two, I need help writing these grants. So those are my biggest need right now for the project.
And has the majority of the funds come from grants or donations or some
Yeah,
foundation?
and North Valley we have some funds also, and of course the land is a resource in and of itself. But we've had a local church give us money because they heard what we were doing and care deeply about housing in Newberg. They looked at doing something similar in their neighborhood, and it wasn't received real well by neighbors, and so they gave us money saying, thank you for doing this. So
yeah, I think it's kind of a NIMBY, like not in my backyard kind of thing. Everyone wants it.
Everyone thinks it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Just somewhere else.
All these ideas first. Yeah. Anyway, no, I appreciate that. And one last question is, given your involvement, you've probably gotten much more involved in the politics side of Newberg than you would have wanted. And there's always the negative side of things, and I'm always aware of that. But on this podcast, I like talking about hope. And so given what you know and your position here, what gives you hope about the future of Newberg?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that gives me hope about Newberg. I've been here 25 years, and Newberg is full of good people. And so what gives me hope is Newberg as a community coming together, thinking creatively to address our concerns. Because homelessness or houselessness and affordable housing isn't just my concern or just your concern. That impacts all of us here in Newberg. I was talking with Friends View director. I mean, housing is such a huge thing now that a lot of our big companies here in Newberg have a concern for their workforce because there's not housing for the workforce that they're needing in Friends View and the Allison and ADEC and these bigger employers in town. And so it's affecting Newberg in many different avenues. And so I think it takes all of us coming together and talking together and coming to the table and being creative. This is just one little sliver that we'd like to offer. And hopefully there are other ways that we come together and be creative.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marie. Thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate your time. Mason, you can cut that part out. Not me to call you by your last name. Thank you so much, Leslie, for your time. I appreciate you coming and sharing all of that. I'm honestly really excited about this. I know there's been obviously the things that we've discussed and some of the resistance, but ultimately I really am hopeful that as the truth gets out, that people will be a lot more receptive to this, and I think it will be a really good thing for our town. So thank you so much, and it's great to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Giving Town podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who you think might benefit from hearing it. While more and more people are continuing to hear about this podcast, I still need your help to spread the message about all the people and organizations that make Newberg so great. Well, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next episode.